Welcome to the last set of capital letters in Faux Calligraphy. If you've been following along, then you know by now the first step is to mark your baseline, header line, and ascender. This is where your lowercase letters fit, and we're going to make our capital letters 2 spaces tall. So this will cover V through the end of the alphabet. So starting with V. Now V is a confusing one because we want to follow our slant lines, but the letter V has 2 slants in it. And we want the downstroke to be the first line that we make, and we overall want the letter to be slanted. But if you make your downstroke along this slant line, then the second one will have to be even more slanted to make it look like a V, and then it'll end up looking like it's extremely slanted. So we're going to make the first one not exactly follow the slant line. It's actually going to end up being almost vertical. And then the upstroke will be more slanted. So overall, the shape of the V follows the slant line, and we're going to add the shade to this side of it. And I'm going to come out to make my spacing and then come meet it at this point. Like that. The second version is going to be pretty similar, where we're going to start with our downstroke, and then on the upstroke we'll just make it a little bit wavy. We're going to have the same type of shading on the downstroke. And a little bit of a embellishment on the left with an entry element. And if you want, you can add some shading on this top piece. The last version is going to start like we did the capital U, where we're going to make this oval shape, but then we're going to come down towards the baseline. So kind of the same slant in this shape, and then we're going to finish with an upstroke that's a little bit of a wave. So a little bit of a shade on this side, and then for this shade I started to follow the curve of the line at the top, then made it parallel on this section, and then came back in at the bottom. The W, the first version, is going to be very simple. We're just going to do 2 large underturn shapes, and this one I'm going to go all the way back up to the top. So far this is looking like our lowercase w minus the entrance stroke. And then we're going to end with our mini underturn shape at the top, except it's actually going to be larger than a mini underturn. It's almost going to be the full size of a normal underturn. So if you shrink this down to half the size, it will be the same as a lowercase w. Second one we're going to pretty much make the same way, with 2 large underturns, and then at the top here, instead of making that shape where it's flat on the top and then just down and up, I'm going to make a little loop instead. And then also add the same shape that we had on the V, entry element. And of course, add our shade. The third W is going to be starting the same way as this V, except instead of just ending at the baseline, we're going to continue and curve upward. So it's actually more like, if you remember, the third version of the capital U. So start with an oval shape, come down and back up, and then we'll finish it by making an underturn that starts not quite at the header or at the ascender. It'll be about halfway between the header line and the ascender line, and then come up and then go out like we did for the top of this line. So starting here, coming down, and then out at the top. Again, adding our shade on our downstrokes. The first version of the X, you have an option. You can, so basically we're just going to do 2 lines that cross, and you can make one of them thick and one of them thin. So whichever one you decide to make thick, if you make this one thick and then cross it with a thin line, or if you make this one thick and then cross it with a thin line, you have to make the thick one first. So I'm gonna make my thick one going this way, then add my shade, and this is why you have to make it first, so that when you cross through it, you can leave that gap. Next one we're gonna do the same, except we're gonna make this line kind of wavy. So start by following this line and then curve downward and then back. So this isn't really following the slant line, and this kind of breaks some of the rules of where you add the slant, because we're not really following the slant lines. And then when we cross it, we'll also give this one a little bit of a wave. So I'm gonna bring this up a little bit at the end and over there. Okay, now our last one is gonna actually start the same way as this W again and the V, where we have this oval shape. So it's gonna end up looking like this, except we'll start the oval here, come up around down, and then end this one with an oval shaped loop. Okay, so just on this part alone, we had 3 downstrokes. We had one right here, we had the main one, and then we had this one. Okay, and then we'll just cross it with a straight line, or you could make this a little bit wavy. First style of Y is going to be very simple, just a basic Y shape, and then we'll add shade to the main downstroke. This one will be a little bit more interesting. We're going to make an underturn shape in the top section, so from the A center to the header line, just make an underturn, and then here we're going to come down and loop to the left. Adding that wavy line for some balance. Then we'll shade the inside of the underturn, and right now I want to shade the outside of this line because I connected it right here. If I shaded the inside, then I would be going over this line that I already made. So if you want to shade the inside, you'll have to leave a gap, but you can just shade the outside, come back with a curve to meet that line. If you want, you could add a dot at the end if you want. Okay, and just like all these letters, the third variation for all these letters so far, we're going to start with that same oval shape and then transition into kind of like a compound curve shape. So here's the oval part, and then now we're making, this is like a large compound curve. Okay, I'm going to stop and just add my shading. Now for the last part, we're going to start with a curved line and basically make a descending stem loop. So normally we make a descending stem loop starting at the header line and go below the baseline, but we're going to start this one above the header line and then just go, you can go slightly below the baseline. You don't want to go too low. Stop so we can add our shade. And then follow through at the end. You could also just stop this one like at this point instead of making a loop if you want. We made it to the very last letter. So this first Z, it's just going to start with a line going across and then slanted a little bit more than the slant lines and then across at the bottom. Going to add the shading along this main slant. And I'm actually going to extend this out a little further because it looked like it was too short. So this line and this line should end up being the same length. And this should be straighter. So you can either make this completely parallel and end up right here. So mine kind of started curving a little bit. Or if you do want to curve in, then end it at a point right here. So you could either make it like this or come in and end it right here. This version of Z is going to start with a short downstroke and then an elongated compound curve. Now this line is going to just be another slanted line, and then at the bottom, instead of having a straight line, we'll do another wavy line. So here we had our short downstroke, and then this was like a compound curve. So we'll add some shade right there. And now I'll show you the other way to shade the main slant. So you could come out and then instead of making it parallel the whole way, end up meeting at a point right there. Lastly, we're going to make the Z starting the same way we've started these couple letters with the oval shape, and we're going to make that shape and then come down towards the baseline and then make a horizontal loop. So this is kind of like a two shape almost. And then we're going to finish it by making a descending stem loop type shape like this. So we had our shade on this piece, on the inside of the main curve, and then also on the inside of this descending loop. So as we've gone through the capital alphabet, hopefully you have started to see some patterns and commonalities between the letters. So for instance, we saw that all of these had this oval-shaped start. We also saw a lot of the letters that had this similar wavy shape at the beginning. So as you practice the capital letters, you can use these as a starting point. You can create your own. You can try different combinations of these things that you're seeing in the letters and just be creative and make it your own.